The silence inside the SUV was more searing than any scream. My son, Robert's, words still echoed in my ears. "If you're not going to do what I want, then stay out on the street. Get lost." When the door slammed shut and the car sped away, leaving me alone in the darkness of a desolate road at 62 years old, with no money, no cell phone, I knew something in me had died forever. What I couldn't imagine was that there, on that desperate night near Boulder, Colorado, a woman in a wheelchair would emerge. She took my hand and whispered, "Pretend to be my daughter, dear. Your son and daughter-in-law are going to regret this bitterly." But before we continue, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments what part of the United States or Canada you are watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. My name is Mary, and until that night I was proud of having raised a brilliant son. Robert was a successful lawyer, married to Christine, a beautiful and ambitious woman. I had given them everything I had, my house, my savings, my trust, all in the name of love. When I had the mild stroke 6 months ago, they took me in at their place, but every day was a new humiliation. I heard Christine complaining about the extra work, the cost of my medications, the space I was taking up in their luxurious condo in New York City. That afternoon, we had gone out for what Robert called a special drive. We drove for hours. I was confused but happy to be out of the house after weeks of confinement. When it started to rain, we got into an argument about the will, which Robert insisted I modify, leaving everything to him and nothing to my niece Jessica, who always took care of me. "Don't you understand, Mum? I'm the one taking care of you now," he shouted at me. When I refused, the car stopped abruptly on the shoulder of a side road, very much like those surrounding the Rocky Mountains. "Get out," Christine ordered from the passenger seat, without even turning to look at me. "But it's raining, son. Where are we?" "Either you sign the documents or you get out right here. We're sick of your ingratitude," Robert replied with a coldness I had never seen in his eyes. When I tried to argue, he simply got out of the car, opened the back door, and yanked me by the arm. I fell into the mud, my legs too weak to support me. The rain mixed with my tears as I watched my own son and his wife abandon me, speeding away into the darkness without looking back. I stayed there, sitting in the mud, the icy drops running down my wrinkled face. The dark sky seemed to be collapsing over me. There was no house nearby, just a poorly lit road and the sound of the rain. The bag that was in the car contained my documents, medications, and the little money I still had. Everything was gone. I tried to get up, but my body was trembling from the cold and fear. My knees gave out, and I fell back to the ground. It was then that I heard the sound of wheels on the wet pavement. I thought it was Robert coming back apologetically, but when I turned, I saw a different silhouette emerging from the fog. It was an older lady in an electric wheelchair, protected by a transparent raincoat. Behind her, a tall man held a huge umbrella. She stopped in front of me, her piercing eyes fixed on my desolate face. "It was your son, wasn't it?" she asked with a firm voice that contrasted with her fragile body. I couldn't answer. I just nodded my head as the tears continued to fall. "Come with me," she told me. "Pretend you are my daughter. Your son and daughter-in-law are going to regret bitterly what they did today." "Who are you? How do you know?" I stammered, confused and scared. She smiled, a smile that combined wisdom and determination. "My name is Eleanor Riley, and I recognize abandonment when I see it. Come on, before you catch pneumonia." The man accompanying her approached, extending his hand to help me. I hesitated for a moment. But what did I have to lose? I was alone, penniless, without documents, without medicine, abandoned in the rain. I took the extended hand, and he helped me up. "This is George, my assistant," Eleanor explained. "My car is right there. You'll be fine now." As George guided me toward a black car parked a few feet away, I looked at Eleanor and saw something in her eyes that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just kindness. It was a steely determination, as if she knew exactly what she was doing and why. I had no idea that night would mark the beginning of such a profound transformation in my life, nor that this mysterious woman, in her wheelchair, held secrets that would forever change my understanding of family, revenge, and, above all, myself. The interior of the car was luxurious and warm, a shocking contrast to the mud and rain that covered me. George tucked a blanket over my trembling legs, while Eleanor watched me with unsettling intensity. "Where are we going?" I asked. My voice was still shaking. "To my house," Eleanor replied. "Don't worry. You will be safe there." I looked out the window, watching the desolate road disappear as we followed a route I didn't know. It was strange how in a matter of minutes my life had taken such a radical turn. Suddenly I realized I was in a car with strangers, with no one in the world knowing where I was. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I know what it feels like," she said simply. "I know what it is to be discarded by the one who should protect you." George kept his eyes on the road, impassive, as the car cut through the storm. After about 30 minutes, we turned onto a private road that climbed up a hill. When the headlights illuminated what was ahead, my breath caught. It was an imposing, colonial revival-style mansion with large windows and a majestic entrance. The kind of place you see in movies set in Virginia, not in real life. George parked under an elegant portico and got out to open the door for Eleanor, activating the mechanism that lowered the platform for her wheelchair. "Let's go inside," she told me. "There are dry clothes waiting for you and a room prepared." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, antique furniture that seemed to have stories to tell. A housekeeper greeted us at the door, showing no surprise at seeing me soaked and confused. "Carla, this is Mary," Eleanor announced. "She will be staying with us for a while. Prepare a hot bath and take her to the blue room, please." Carla nodded and guided me up a magnificent staircase. I followed in silence, still too stunned to ask questions. The room was spacious and elegant, with a huge bed and windows overlooking a garden I could barely make out in the darkness. The hot bath was a balm for my aching body. I found silk pajamas on the bed and soft robes in the closet. Everything there seemed to have been prepared for my arrival, as if it were expected. This feeling gave me the chills. When I went back downstairs, I found Eleanor in the living room next to the lit fireplace. Her wheelchair was positioned strategically in front of the flames, and she was watching the fire with a thoughtful expression. "Sit down, Mary," she told me, indicating an armchair beside her. "Carla will bring tea and something to eat." I obeyed, still feeling like I was in a strange dream. "How do you know my name?" I asked, realizing I had never introduced myself. Eleanor smiled. "I know many things about you. Your son Robert, your daughter-in-law Christine, the house you gave them, the stroke you had 6 months ago. I even know about your niece Jessica, whom Robert wants to exclude from the will." I'm speechless. How is that possible? "I have my methods," she replied vaguely. "The important thing is that I know you don't deserve what they did. And believe me, they are going to pay for this." "I don't want revenge," I murmured, although a part of me didn't believe my own words. "I just want to understand why my own son—" "Money and power change people, Mary," Eleanor interrupted. "But not always for the better. Robert and Christine think they can do whatever they want without consequences. We are going to show them they are wrong. Carla came in with a tray of tea and cookies. As she served, I observed Eleanor more closely. Despite the wheelchair, there was something undeniably powerful about her. Her grey hair was impeccably styled, her clothes were elegant, and her hands, though wrinkled, sported discreet but visibly expensive jewellery. "Who are you, really?" I asked when Carla left. Eleanor took a sip of tea before answering. "I am someone who learned that justice doesn't always come through conventional channels, and tomorrow you are going to discover exactly what that means." That night, lying in the luxurious bed of that mysterious mansion, I couldn't sleep. The image of Robert abandoning me in the rain mixed with Eleanor's enigmatic face and her unsettling words. Something told me my life would never be the same. And I was right. At the following day, at dawn, I woke up disoriented. For a moment I thought I was home, that the whole nightmare of the night before had been just a bad dream. But the elegant and unfamiliar room around me confirmed the harsh reality. My son had abandoned me on a desolate road, and now I was in the mansion of a stranger who seemed to know too much about my life. I found new clothes folded over a chair, all in my size, which only added to the mystery. I put on a simple but elegant outfit and went downstairs, following the smell of fresh coffee. Eleanor was in the dining room, her wheelchair positioned at the head of a long, polished table. George stood behind her, like a silent, watchful shadow. When she saw me, she smiled. "Good morning, Mary. I hope you slept well." "I confess, not much," I replied honestly, sitting down where she indicated. "I have many questions." "And you will have answers," she assured me, as Carla served coffee and a full American breakfast. "But first, we need to resolve more urgent matters. Your documents, for example, were in my purse, in Robert's car. I have already provided second copies," she stated casually, as if she were talking about the weather. "How? That's impossible in such a short time." She smiled again, that mysterious smile that was starting to bother me. "I have connections and money, two things that make life much easier, Mary." I observed her more closely as we ate. There was something familiar about her, although I was sure I had never seen her before. "Robert must have noticed my absence by now," I commented. "Don't worry about that. He won't be looking for you." "How can you be so sure?" Eleanor gestured to George, who immediately took a tablet and handed it to me. On the screen, there was a text message sent from my number to Robert. "Son, I caught a ride with a friend. I'm going to stay with her for a while. I need to think about everything. Don't look for me." "But I don't have a cell phone. Mine was—" "In your purse." "I know," Eleanor completed. "That text was sent from a new number, registered in your name, but which Robert doesn't know. He's going to think you changed phones." I was speechless at the level of planning. "Why all this effort? Why do you care what happened to me?" Eleanor set her silverware aside and faced me with an intensity that made me shiver. "Because Robert and Christine are not the first people to abandon someone vulnerable out of greed, and I swore that as long as I lived, I would use my resources to ensure that people like them faced the consequences of their actions." After coffee, Eleanor invited me for a walk through the mansion's gardens. George pushed her wheelchair while I walked beside her, still assimilating everything that was happening. The garden was a spectacle in itself, with fragrant rose bushes, ornate fountains, and marble statues. We stopped under an elegant gazebo, where Eleanor dismissed George with a gesture. "Mary," she began when we were alone, "there's something I need to show you." She took a small remote control from her pocket and pressed a button. To my surprise, a panel slid open on the gazebo floor, revealing an embedded digital screen. With another button, The screen lit up, showing an image I recognized instantly. The condo where I lived with Robert and Christine. "What is this?" I asked, alarmed. "I have cameras installed at several strategic points around your place," she explained calmly. "Watch." The image changed, showing Robert and Christine in the living room. There was no sound, but it was clear they were arguing. Robert looked nervous, running his hands through his hair repeatedly, while Christine gesticulated angrily. "They're arguing about you," Eleanor said. "Christine is worried you might have gone to the police. Robert is assuring her that you wouldn't, that you were always too weak to confront them." I felt a deep pain watching my son talk about me that way, even without hearing his words. How could he know me so little? "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, feeling tears welling up. "So you understand who you're dealing with. They are not remorseful, Mary. They are only worried about the consequences for themselves." The image changed again, showing Robert in the study, on the phone. He looked agitated. "He's talking to his lawyer now," Eleanor explained. "He's asking what happens to his inheritance if you disappear for long enough to be declared deceased." My heart sank. Is my son planning my death? "Not exactly, but he is exploring options to benefit from your absence." I closed my eyes, unable to keep watching. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care so much about my situation?" Eleanor turned off the screen, and the panel closed back up on the gazebo floor. For a long moment, she remained silent, looking at the gardens with a distant expression. "20 years ago," she finally began, "I was a very different woman. Healthy, active, with a promising career as a judge. I had an only son, Ethan, and an ambitious daughter-in-law, Grace." Her voice trembled slightly, the first display of vulnerability I had seen in her. "When I suffered an accident that left me paraplegic, they took me into their home. At first, everything seemed fine, but little by little, the comments, the complaints, the humiliation began, exactly as it happened to you." I felt a chill as I realized the similarities between our stories. "One night, after an argument about money, they took me for a drive. Ethan stopped the car in an isolated area and abandoned me there, in my wheelchair, with no phone, no money, nothing." "My God," I murmured, horrified. "I stayed there for hours until a couple found me and called the police. When they rescued me, I made a decision. I would never be a victim again, and I would use everything I had, my legal knowledge, my connections, my money, to get revenge and to help other people in the same situation." "And what happened to your son?" I asked, fearful of the answer. A somber smile formed on her lips. "Ethan and Grace lost everything. Absolutely everything. It took me years, but I managed to prove they had embezzled money from the firm where they worked. He was arrested. She left him. When Ethan got out of jail, he was a broken man, penniless, wifeless, with no future." The way she spoke, showing no remorse whatsoever, scared me. "And you didn't feel sorry? He was your son." "He stopped being my son the moment he left me to die on that highway," she replied coldly. "Since then, I've helped other women like us, Mary. Women betrayed by those who should protect them." "And what do you plan to do with Robert and Christine?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The same," she simply replied. "I'm going to ruin them completely unless you ask me to stop." I looked at her, confused. "Why would you give me that choice?" "Because revenge must be a conscious choice, Mary. I don't want you to blame me later when you realize the extent of what I'm going to do. You need to decide. Do you want your son and daughter-in-law to pay for what they did, or do you prefer to just move on?" I looked at the immaculate gardens around us, trying to process everything I had discovered. A part of me wanted to scream, "No, stop!" to protect Robert despite everything. But another part, a part I barely recognized in myself, wanted to see him face the consequences of his actions. "I need time to think," I finally replied. "Time is something we have plenty of," Eleanor said, maneuvering her wheelchair to head back to the mansion. "But remember, while you're thinking, they are planning how to permanently get rid of you." I followed her back to the house, feeling as if I were walking a tightrope between the past and a future I could barely imagine. In the days that followed, I lived in a strange limbo. Eleanor's mansion was like a world apart, protected and isolated from reality. I was introduced to the staff, in addition to Carla and George. There were gardeners, security guards, and a team of people working in offices in the basement, whose exact functions were never clear. Every morning, Eleanor showed me new images of Robert's condo. I saw my son and Christine continuing their lives normally, showing no remorse, discussing how they would divide my assets in case I never reappeared. The pain I felt seeing those scenes was indescribable, but Eleanor insisted that I needed to see. "The truth hurts, but illusion kills," she would say. One particularly cold morning, Eleanor took me to a part of the mansion I hadn't yet seen. It was a kind of gallery, with portraits on the walls and objects in display cases. It looked like a private museum. "These are the other women I've helped," she explained, as George slowly pushed her chair down the hallway. "Each one has her story, her pain, her redemption." I looked at the portraits of women of different ages. All had a look that mixed dignity and determination. Under each photo, there was a small plaque with a name and 2 dates. "What do those dates mean?" I asked. "The first is when they were abandoned. The second is when they obtained justice." At the end of the hallway, there was an empty space on the wall. "This spot is reserved for you," Eleanor said with an enigmatic smile. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. A middle-aged woman, elegant and with an air of authority, introduced herself as Sophia Davis, Eleanor's personal attorney. She brought a folder full of documents. "Mrs. Mary," she began formally, "I am here to discuss your legal options." "Legal options?" I repeated, confused. "Yes, Eleanor asked me to prepare different strategies, depending on what you decide to do regarding your son and daughter-in-law." Sophia opened the folder and began to explain to me, in clear but technical terms, how we could proceed. One option was simply to ensure my security and financial independence, annulling any power Robert had over my assets. Another option, more aggressive, involved reporting him for abandonment of a vulnerable person, which could result in serious legal consequences. And then there was the third option, which Sophia presented with a professional neutrality that contrasted with the gravity of what she was suggesting. We could ruin Robert and Christine completely, using Eleanor's resources and connections to expose frauds they didn't even know they were committing. "Frauds? What frauds?" I asked, alarmed. "None yet," Sophia calmly replied. "But we could create convincing evidence." "That would be illegal," I murmured, horrified. "Technically, yes," Sophia admitted. "But Eleanor has ways to ensure that nothing turns against you. The choice is yours, Mrs. Mary. What do you wish to do?" When Sophia left, I sat alone in the library for hours, contemplating what to do. In the evening, Eleanor found me still there, lost in my thoughts. "Have you decided yet?" she asked, maneuvering her chair to sit beside me. "How can I choose between protecting my son and protecting myself?" I replied, anguished. "He made that choice when he left you on that highway," Eleanor reminded me, her voice firm but not cruel. "Robert chose the money over you." "He's my son," I insisted, tears running down my face. "Despite everything, Eleanor took my hands in hers. And it was precisely because he was your son that the betrayal was so painful. Mary, you are not choosing between him and you. You are choosing between continuing to be a victim or taking the reins of your life again. What if I choose to do nothing? What if I just want to leave, to start over somewhere else? Then I will respect your decision, she said. I will provide you with a place to live, comfortable and safe. But Robert and Christine will continue to believe they can do what they did without consequences, and they will do the same to others. That night was the hardest since I arrived at the mansion. I dreamed of Robert as a boy, his smiling little face when I took him to school, his first lost tooth, his graduation, his wedding. How had we arrived at this point? Where had I gone wrong? The next morning, I made my decision. I found Eleanor in the garden, admiring the roses that were beginning to bloom with the approaching spring. I want them to know what they did, I said, my voice firmer than it had ever been. I want them to feel the weight of their actions, but I don't want to destroy them completely. Eleanor studied me for a moment, as if evaluating my resolve. Are you sure? Clemency can be interpreted as weakness. It's not clemency, I corrected. It's a choice. My choice. I want Robert and Christine to lose what they value most, money, status. But I want to give them the chance to rebuild their lives as better people. The chance they didn't give me. A slow smile formed on Eleanor's face. You are stronger than you imagine, Mary, and wiser than I was when I was in your place. That same afternoon, Sophia returned with new documents. The plan was simple but ingenious. We would reveal that Robert had committed professional negligence in a few cases, enough to tarnish his reputation and make him lose important clients, but not enough to be jailed or disbarred. As for Christine, we would discover and expose some accounting manipulations she was doing at the firm where she worked. Again, enough for a demotion and loss of prestige, but not for her termination. And the condo? Sophia asked. Technically, it is still yours. I want it back, I replied without hesitation. Not to live in, but to sell it and donate the money to organizations that help abandoned elderly. Eleanor nodded in approval. An excellent choice. And where do you plan to live? That was a question I didn't have an answer to. I don't know. Maybe rent a small apartment. Something I can maintain with my pension. I have a better proposal, Eleanor said. Stay here. Become part of what I've built. Help me find and assist other women like us. I looked around. At the imposing mansion, at the meticulously cared-for gardens, at the empire Eleanor had built from her own pain. It was tempting, but terrifying. Why me? You barely know me. I know enough, she replied. I saw how you reacted when you faced the betrayal. I saw the compassion in your eyes, even when you spoke of punishing your son. You have the balance that I lack, Mary. I tend to go too far. Perhaps you can teach me to find a middle ground. The proposal took me by surprise. I need to think about it. Naturally, she nodded. But while you're thinking, there's something I want to show you. Something that might help with your decision. Eleanor took me to a room I hadn't yet seen, on the mansion's second floor. It was a large space, with several tables and computers, where some people were working intently. On the walls, there were screens showing images of different places, residences, offices, streets. This is our operations center, she explained. From here, we monitor the cases we take on. On one of the screens, I recognized Robert's condo. On another, I saw his law office. A third showed the firm where Christine worked. We began implementing the plan this morning, Eleanor said. The first step was to send an anonymous email to Christine's boss, suggesting he check certain discrepancies in the accounts she manages. I watched, fascinated and horrified at the same time, as Eleanor showed me how the plan would be executed in the coming days. It was like attending a play where I knew the ending, but not the details of how we would get there. "And now," she said, guiding me toward a separate table, "we are going to prepare for your reappearance." My reappearance? Yes. When everything is in motion, you will return, not as the fragile, dependent mother they abandoned, but as an independent, self-assured woman. This is crucial for the final phase of the plan. What is it? The confrontation, Eleanor replied, her eyes gleaming. The moment you look them in the eyes, and they know they've lost. Eleanor's mansion became my home in the following months. I learned to navigate it as if I had always lived there, discovering its secrets and understanding its greater purpose. Every room, every object seemed to hold a story, stories of women like me who had been abandoned and then rescued. Sophia, the lawyer, became a constant presence. She briefed me on legal matters and helped me understand each stage of the plan that was being meticulously executed. The operations center was like an anthill, with people working day and night, monitoring Robert and Christine, collecting information, planting small seeds of chaos in their lives. The secret, Eleanor explained one afternoon, is never to make it look like there's a plan. Every setback must appear to be coincidence, bad luck, or the natural consequence of their own actions. And so it was. First, small setbacks began to affect Robert at work. An important email that never arrived. A client who inexplicably cancelled. A file that disappeared from the system. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make him nervous, irritable. As for Christine, the discrepancies in her accounts were discreetly pointed out to her supervisor. They weren't actual frauds. Eleanor made sure no one was falsely accused of a crime, but minor inconsistencies that suggested incompetence, not dishonesty. "Why not just reveal that they abandoned me?" I asked once. "Wouldn't that be enough to ruin their reputations?" "It would be your word against theirs," Sophia explained. "And unfortunately, our society still tends to discredit older people, especially women. Robert would likely claim you are confused, exaggerating, or even making it up out of resentment. It's more effective to attack what they truly value: professional success, money, status." I watched through the cameras as the lives of my son and daughter-in-law slowly began to unravel. Arguments between them became more frequent and bitter. Robert blamed Christine for spending too much. She accused him of being incompetent. They no longer had time for sophisticated dinners or parties with friends. Financial worry began to corrode their relationship. One night, I saw Robert drinking alone in the living room, looking at an old photo. A photo of us when he was a child. For a moment, my heart sank. That was still my son, no matter how much he had hurt me. I wondered if I was going too far. "Doubts are normal," Eleanor said, noticing my hesitation. "But remember, we are not destroying Robert. We are giving him the opportunity to rediscover his values." Meanwhile, my own transformation continued. Sophia had recovered my documents and bank accounts. I now had access to the resources Robert tried to take from me. Furthermore, Eleanor insisted that I consult medical specialists to properly treat the after-effects of my stroke. "You have been neglected for too long," she said. With the right treatment, physical therapy, and correct medication, my mobility and energy improved significantly. I also began working with a psychologist, Dr. Claire, to process everything that had happened: the abandonment, the anger, the guilt I still felt for punishing my son. "True healing comes when you understand that you are not taking revenge," Dr. Claire said during one of our sessions. "You are restoring balance." 3 months passed like this, with Robert and Christine facing increasing professional and financial difficulties, while I strengthened physically and emotionally, Then, the day Eleanor had planned from the beginning arrived, the day of the confrontation. "Are you ready?" she asked when I entered the dining room that morning. I took a deep breath. "I think so." "It's not necessary to be sure," she said gently. "Fear is natural. But remember, you are no longer the woman they abandoned on that highway." The plan was simple. Robert and Christine had put the condo up for sale, my home, which I had given them, to cover their rising debts. Sophia had arranged for me to appear as a potential buyer, accompanied by Eleanor. George drove us in a different car, more discreet than Eleanor's usual limousine. Throughout the ride, I tried to calm my racing heart. I would see my son again after months, but in circumstances he could never imagine. We arrived promptly at the appointed time. The house, which I knew so well, looked different now, colder, less cared for. George helped Eleanor with the wheelchair, while I waited, wearing sunglasses and an elegant hat that partially hid my face. The realtor greeted us at the door. "Mrs. Riley," she greeted Eleanor, "and this must be your friend, Mrs. Mary," I replied simply. "Just Mary." We went inside. The house was staged for the visit, but I noticed small signs of decline. A worn sofa, walls that needed new paint, valuables that had disappeared, probably sold. "Are the owners home?" Eleanor asked the realtor. "Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Almond are home. They asked to be present during the showings." My heart raced even faster when I heard approaching footsteps. And then there he was, Robert, my son, thinner and with deep dark circles, but still with that confident gait he had inherited from his father. Beside him, Christine, tense and visibly stressed. "Good day," Robert said, extending his hand to Eleanor first. "Robert Almond, and this is my wife, Christine." "Eleanor Riley," she replied, accepting the handshake. "And this is my friend who is interested in the house." Robert turned to me, his professional smile already on his face, ready to convince me to buy. But when I took off my glasses, the smile froze. His eyes widened in recognition and shock. "Mom?" he whispered, his face turning pale. Christine, who was beside him, let out a small gasp. "It's not possible." "Hello, Robert," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "Christine, I see you are selling my house." The silence that followed was dense, charged with tension. The realtor, realizing something was wrong, muttered an excuse and discreetly moved to another room. "What? How? Where have you been?" Robert stammered, still in shock. "Does that matter?" I asked, remaining calm. "After you abandoned me on that highway, in the rain, I thought you made it quite clear you didn't care about my whereabouts." "I didn't. It wasn't exactly like that," he tried to argue, casting a desperate look at Christine, who remained paralyzed. "It was exactly like that," I corrected. "You left me to die, Robert. Your own son." "We were stressed," Christine intervened, finding her voice. "You know how difficult it has been taking care of you since the stroke. We didn't intend to leave me alone, without money, without documents, without my medicines," I completed. "How strange, because that's exactly what you did." Robert took a step toward me, his face a mixture of fear and calculation. Always the lawyer, trying to assess the situation, find a way out. "Mom, we looked for you," he lied shamelessly. "We were desperate. We went back to that spot. But you were already gone. We thought maybe you had gotten a ride, and then we received your message saying you were with a friend." "What message?" I asked, feigning confusion. "My phone was in the car with you." Robert paled even more. Eleanor, who had observed the scene in silence, decided to intervene. "Mr. Almond," she said, with the authority of someone who spent years as a judge, "spare us the lies. We know exactly what happened that night. We have witnesses, we have evidence, and we also know what you did afterward. Or rather, what you didn't do. You didn't look for Mary. You didn't go to the police. Instead, you started planning how you would divide her assets if she never reappeared." Robert staggered as if he had been struck. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" "I am someone who knows abandonment when she sees it," Eleanor replied, repeating the same words she had told me that fateful night. "And what do I want? Justice." It was then that Sophia entered the room, carrying a folder. We hadn't seen her come in, but she was clearly waiting for the opportune moment. "Robert and Christine Almond," she said formally. "I am Sophia Davis, attorney for Mrs. Mary Almond. I am here to inform you that, as title holders of this property, you are being evicted. Furthermore, we have enough evidence for criminal prosecution for abandonment of a vulnerable person, in addition to attempted misappropriation of assets." Christine started to cry, not tears of remorse, but of panic. Robert, on the other hand, tried to regain composure, the lawyer in him taking control. "This is ridiculous," he protested. "You can't prove anything. It's her word against ours." Sophia smiled coldly. "It's not just her word. We have witnesses who saw you abandon her on that highway. We have records that you did not report her disappearance. We have emails and messages exchanged between you discussing how you would benefit if she never reappeared. Do you want me to continue?" Robert slumped into a chair, defeated. Christine continued crying, now murmuring accusations against him. "You said no one would know. You promised it would be simple." I watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. Sadness for the family I had lost. Relief at finally facing the truth. A strange sense of power at being in control of the situation. But mainly I felt pity. Pity for the desperate man in front of me, who one day was the boy I loved more than anything in the world. "I don't want you to go to jail," I said, surprising everyone, even myself. "I don't want to destroy your lives completely." Robert looked up, confused. "Then what do you want?" "I want my house back. I want my assets back. I want you to admit what you did, not just to me, but to yourselves. And I want you to understand what you almost lost forever, the chance to be better people." Eleanor looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. This was not exactly the plan we had discussed. I was supposed to be relentless, to let them face all the consequences. But in that moment, looking at my devastated son, I decided that true justice was not in total destruction, but in the opportunity for redemption. "Sophia," I called, "what would be the terms of a settlement?" The lawyer, professional as always, quickly presented the conditions. Robert and Christine would have a week to vacate the condo. They would return all my assets and documents. They would sign a confession detailing the abandonment, which would be kept as a guarantee. If they ever tried anything against me again, the document would be used. "And in exchange," Sophia concluded, "Mrs. Mary will not press criminal charges against you." There was more, of course, financial consequences, restrictions, but the essential thing was that they would have the opportunity to rebuild their lives, albeit from scratch and with the constant memory of what they had done. Robert and Christine, cornered and out of options, agreed to everything. While Sophia handled the details, Eleanor led me out of the house, into the garden where I had so often sat to read, watch birds, and dream of a future that I believed would always include my son by my side. "You forgave them," Eleanor said, not as a criticism, but with curiosity. Why? I looked up at the clear afternoon sky. Because the difference between them and us lies precisely in that, in the ability to show mercy when we have the power to destroy. Eleanor was silent for a moment, contemplating my words. Perhaps you are right, she finally said. When Ethan abandoned me, I didn't give him any chance. Maybe I should have done differently. For the first time since I met her, I saw genuine vulnerability in Eleanor's eyes. It's never too late, I said gently, if you want to look for him. He died 2 years ago, she interrupted, her voice low. Alone, in a public hospital. I only found out after the funeral. I placed my hand over hers. I'm sorry. Me too, she replied. And I realized she was referring not only to her son's death, but to everything that had happened between them, to all the lost opportunities. When Sophia finished with Robert and Christine, we returned to the mansion in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I had confronted my son and obtained justice, but not in the way I initially imagined. Instead of the bitter satisfaction of revenge, I felt something deeper and more lasting. Peace. And now? Eleanor asked when we arrived. Now, I replied. We start the next phase. The condo I recovered from Robert and Christine was no longer a home for me. It was full of memories, some good, others too painful. I decided to sell it, as originally planned, and use the money to create a foundation dedicated to helping elderly victims of family abandonment. The Aurora Foundation, Eleanor suggested, in honor of the dawn you saw when you left the darkness of abandonment behind. She loved the idea. It will be a more public arm of what we do here, she said, a perfect complement. In the months that followed, I fully immersed myself in the Foundation's work, with the invaluable help of Sophia and Eleanor's team. I discovered skills I didn't know I possessed. For organization, for public speaking, for connecting with other people who had gone through similar experiences. The Aurora Foundation grew quickly, attracting donations and volunteers. We created programs for psychological support, legal assistance, and social reintegration. Each new face that came to us reminded me of where I myself had been just a year before. Lost, desperate, not believing there could be a new beginning. As for Robert and Christine, we kept our distance. But we didn't lose sight of them. Through Eleanor's discreet surveillance networks, I learned that they had moved to a smaller city, where Robert worked at a modest law office, and Christine taught accounting classes. They lived simply, struggling to rebuild their lives. I felt no joy in their difficulties, only the hope that they were learning something valuable. One afternoon, about a year after the confrontation, I received a letter. The envelope was simple, the address handwritten, Robert's handwriting, which I would recognize anywhere. I hesitated before opening it, fearing what it might contain. Eleanor, who was with me in the living room, noticed my apprehension. "Do you want me to leave?" she offered. "No," I replied. "I'd rather not be alone for this." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and began to read. "Mum, I don't know if you will read this letter, and I wouldn't blame you if you decided to throw it away unopened. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your attention. But I need to say a few things, even if it's just for the paper. What I did to you was unforgivable. There is no justification, although I spent months trying to invent one to feel better. The truth is, I was consumed by greed, by selfishness, and I betrayed the purest and most unconditional love I have ever received in my life, yours. Since that day at the house, Christine and I have lived with the weight of what we did. Our marriage ended 3 months ago, not because of the money or status we lost, but because we finally saw each other for who we really are. I am trying to be a better person. I work as a pro bono lawyer 3 days a week, helping people who can't afford legal representation. It's not much, and it certainly doesn't erase what I did, but it's a start. I saw the Aurora Foundation online. It seems wonderful, exactly what you always wanted to do. I am proud of you, even though I don't have the right to feel it. I'm not asking to come back into your life. I know that bridge was burned by my own hands. I just wanted you to know that your words that day, about giving me the chance to be a better person, meant something. I'm trying to honor that chance. With love, even if I don't deserve to use that word, Robert. When I finished reading, tears were streaming freely down my face. Eleanor reached out and took my hand in a silent gesture of support. "Are you going to respond?" she finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe he really changed. Another part fears it's just another manipulation. "We can verify," Eleanor offered. "Find out if what he says about the volunteer work is true." I thought for a moment. Yes, let's verify. But even if it's true, I'm not ready to have him back in my life. Not yet. Eleanor nodded, understanding. Time heals, but it leaves scars. Some relationships never go back to what they were, and maybe they shouldn't. Her words resonated with me. Throughout that year, our own relationship had deepened in ways I hadn't expected. Eleanor, with all her toughness and determination, had become not only my mentor, but my closest friend. We shared not just a mission, but a mutual understanding that came from having passed through the same valley of shadows. As the Aurora Foundation grew, so did my role in Eleanor's larger organization. I became a kind of counterpoint to her. Where she saw revenge, I sought redemption. Where she applied force, I attempted compassion. Together we formed a balance that benefited all the women we helped. And there were many. Every month, new stories came to us. Wives abandoned after decades of marriage, older mothers left in hospitals, grandmothers evicted from their own homes by greedy grandchildren. Each story was unique. Each woman had her own pain, but the pattern was painfully familiar. "How can there be so much cruelty in the world?" I asked Eleanor one night, after hearing a particularly shocking case. "It's not cruelty, necessarily," she replied thoughtfully. "It's indifference. People become so obsessed with their own wants and needs that they simply stop seeing others as complete human beings, especially the elderly. It's as if we become invisible after a certain age. But we are changing that," I affirmed, with a conviction that grew every day. One woman at a time. One fall afternoon, 2 years after my rescue, Eleanor called me to her private office, a place where she rarely received anyone. It was an austere room, with a large oak desk, walls covered with books, and surprisingly no visible technology. "Mary," she began, with an unusual seriousness even for her, "I need to discuss something important with you." I sat in the chair across from hers, worried by her tone. "What happened?" "My health is worsening," she said directly, without preamble. "The doctors give me a year at most." The news hit me like a punch. Eleanor, despite the wheelchair, always seemed indestructible to me, a force of nature, unwavering and eternal. "No," I protested. "There must be treatments, specialists." "I've already consulted the best," she interrupted gently. "It is degenerative and irreversible. I've been dealing with this for longer than you imagine." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you already had so much to deal with, and because I myself was in denial." She smiled, a fragile but genuine smile. "But that's not why I called you here. I called you because I need you to take over." take over? Of all this, she made a sweeping gesture, indicating not only the office but the entire mansion, the organization she had built. I want you to be my successor, Mary. I was speechless. The responsibility was immense. Not just the mansion and its resources, but the network of people who depended on us, the women we still hadn't found and rescued. I don't know if I can, I finally admitted. You built all of this from scratch. You are exactly who should continue, Eleanor interrupted firmly. You bring what was always missing in my approach: balance, compassion, the ability to see beyond the pain toward the possibility of healing. This organization needs that to survive long term. She opened a drawer and took out a thick folder. Here is everything: legal documents, bank accounts, contacts, information about every current case. Sophia is already aware and will help with the transition. I took the folder with trembling hands. What if I fail? You won't, she replied with unwavering confidence. Do you remember that night, in the rain, when I found you? I told you your son and daughter-in-law would regret it bitterly. And they did regret it, didn't they? But not in the way I originally planned. It was your influence that brought the possibility of redemption into the equation. She reached out and took my hands in hers. That night it changed 2 lives, Mary. Yours, obviously, but also mine. You taught me that justice doesn't have to mean total destruction, that there is strength in mercy. It is that lesson that I want you to continue after I am gone. In the following months, we worked side by side to prepare for the transition. Eleanor taught me everything about the internal workings of the organization, the contacts, the methods, the resources. As her health deteriorated, I took on more and more responsibilities, always with her advice and guidance. It was painful to see her weaken, this woman who had saved me with such strength and determination. But even on her most difficult days, her mind remained sharp as a razor, and her will indomitable. 6 months after our conversation in the office, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was prepared, of course. All arrangements had been made, all documents signed. But nothing could prepare me for the pain of the loss, for the void her absence left in the mansion, in the organization, in my life. The funeral was discreet, as she wanted. Only the closest people, myself, Sophia, George, Carla, and a few other long-time employees. There were no family members. Eleanor had outlived everyone. After the ceremony, I found an envelope in my room with my name on it, handwritten by Eleanor. Inside was a letter and a small gold key. Mary, if you are reading this, I am no longer here. Don't be sad. I lived exactly as long as I needed to live, and did exactly what I needed to do, including finding you. The key I am sending you opens a small box at the bottom of the second drawer of my desk. Inside, you will find something I always wanted to give you but never found the right moment. Remember, what I built was not just an organization of revenge, but a sanctuary for women the world tried to erase. Continue that work, but do it your way. The compassion you bring is what was missing in my approach. And finally, a piece of advice. Never forget that night in the rain, the woman you were and the woman you became. There is power in that transformation, a power that will continue long after we are all gone. With love, Eleanor. With tears in my eyes, I went to her office and opened the indicated drawer. There I found a small carved wooden box. The key fit perfectly, and when I turned it, the lid opened with a soft click. Inside was an old black and white photograph of 2 young women smiling at the camera. I turned it over and read the inscription on the back. Eleanor and Elizabeth, 1965. Next to the photo, there was a silver brooch in the shape of an aurora, sun rays being born on the horizon. I immediately recognized the face of the other woman in the photo. It was my mother, Elizabeth, who had passed away more than 10 years ago. Eleanor had known her. They had been friends. Suddenly, everything made sense. Eleanor had not found me by chance that night. She had looked for me, perhaps watched me for some time, waiting for the right moment, or the most desperate moment, to intervene. I placed the brooch over my heart, feeling a connection that transcended time, uniting 3 generations of women, my mother, Eleanor, and myself. Each of us had faced abandonment in our own way, and now it was my turn to transform that pain into purpose, that loss into a legacy. That night, alone in the office that was now mine, I made a promise. To Eleanor, to my mother, to all the women who were still out there, waiting to be found. I would continue. 5 years have passed since Eleanor's death. The mansion remains as it was, imposing and welcoming at the same time, but its purpose has expanded in ways that perhaps even she could not foresee. The Aurora Foundation became a nationally recognized organization, with branches in 3 states. We no longer work in the shadows. Although certain operations still require discretion, most of our work now happens in the light of day, with the support of authorities, other organizations, and even politicians who share our mission. I transformed part of the mansion into a permanent refuge for older women who have nowhere to go. The rooms that were once empty are now full of life, of stories, of women who found not only shelter, but a new family. Carla, now in her 70s, is practically the grandmother of everyone. George is still with us, although his responsibilities have changed. Instead of just a chauffeur and bodyguard, he now coordinates our security team, training young people to help in the rescue and protection of our protégés. Sophia became my closest partner in the Foundation's administration. Her legal expertise remains invaluable, especially now that our work is more public. Together, we managed to pass state laws that increase protection for the elderly and criminalize abandonment more severely. As for Robert, we maintained minimal contact throughout the years. We verified that he really was working as a volunteer lawyer, helping people without resources. Eventually, I responded to his letter, a brief but honest reply, saying that although I couldn't forget what had happened, I recognized his efforts to change. We established a cautious truce, with rare phone calls on special dates and occasional email updates. He never remarried after Christine. He is fully dedicated to social work and, as far as I know, lives a modest but dignified life. In the few times we have met, there is always a palpable awkwardness between us. The scars of the past are too deep to completely disappear, but there is also a mutual respect, albeit distant, which is perhaps the most we can hope for. On a spring morning, 5 years after Eleanor's passing, I received an unexpected visit. A young woman, no more than 30 years old, appeared at the mansion gates asking to speak with me. "My name is Diane Riley," she introduced herself when I received her in the library. "Eleanor Riley was my grandmother." The revelation shocked me. Eleanor never mentioned having grandchildren. "She didn't know about me," Diane explained. "My father was Ethan, her son. He never told her about my existence, and I only found out about her after he died." Diane had the same piercing eyes as Eleanor, the same determined posture. She told me how she found diaries and documents among her father's belongings after his death, revealing the complex history between him and Eleanor, culminating in the abandonment that changed her life forever. "I spent years trying to put the pieces together," she said. "I found out about the Aurora Foundation through a news report. When I saw your photo and read about the work you do, I knew I had found my grandmother's legacy." I offered Diane a cup of tea, the same tea that Eleanor adored, as I absorbed the revelation. Your father never talked about Eleanor, only at the end of his life, when he was very sick. He spoke of a strong woman who had built an empire from nothing, and how he had made the biggest mistake of his life by abandoning her. Diane paused, looking out the window at the gardens. He died with remorse, but also with a strange peace, as if he knew his mother had found a greater purpose. She found it, I confirmed, and she also helped many other people find theirs. Diane smiled shyly. That's why I'm here. I want to know about the work she was doing, that you are still doing. I want to be a part of this, if you'll allow me. I'm a social worker. I've been working with the elderly for 5 years. I looked at the young woman in front of me. Eleanor's blood, the continuation of her lineage that she never knew existed. There was something poetic in that, a cosmic justice that closed a cycle. Eleanor had lost a son, but now her granddaughter returned, as if the universe were trying to balance things. I think Eleanor would be very happy to know you exist, I said, feeling tears in my eyes, and even happier to know you want to continue her work. In the following months, Diane became an integral part of the Aurora Foundation. Her training as a social worker brought a new perspective to our programs. She had Eleanor's determination, but also a sensibility that probably came from her own experiences. Growing up with a father marked by remorse, seeking redemption. One quiet afternoon, I took Diane to Eleanor's private office, which I had kept intact as a kind of memorial. I showed her the photograph of her grandmother with my mother and the aurora-shaped brooch. Our lives intertwined in ways we couldn't imagine, I explained. Your grandmother saved me that rainy night, but in a way, I saved her too, by giving her the chance to rethink her concept of justice, to open space for the possibility of redemption. Diane held the brooch with reverence. It's strange to think I never met her, but I feel like I always knew who she was. She is still alive through the work we do, I replied. And now, through you too. It was Diane who suggested the expansion that would transform the Aurora Foundation again. What if we helped not only the victims, she proposed, but also worked with the aggressors, awareness programs, family therapy, mediation? The idea took me by surprise. You want to help people like your father, like Robert? I want to prevent other people from becoming them, she clarified. Prevention is just as important as rescue. Imagine if someone had intervened before your son abandoned you on that highway. Diane's proposal was bold, but it made sense. It was the logical next step. Not just picking up the pieces after the tragedy occurred, but working to prevent families from breaking apart in the first place. It was something that would never have occurred to Eleanor, with her more binary vision of victims and aggressors, but that aligned perfectly with my own journey of understanding and forgiveness. We created the Recommencement Initiative, an arm of the Aurora Foundation focused on families in crisis, offering counseling, mediation, and support before abandonment occurred. We invited psychologists, social workers, and specialists in family law. And in a move that surprised everyone, I invited Robert to participate as a consultant. Why? Diane asked when I told her my plan. After everything he did? Precisely because of that, I replied. Robert lived both sides of this story. He was the son who abandoned his mother, but he is also someone who went through the painful process of recognizing his mistake and trying to repair it. His experience is valuable. The first meeting between Robert and me at the Foundation's facilities was tense and emotionally charged. He looked older than his 50s, with completely grey hair and deep worry lines on his face. When I introduced him to Diane and explained who she was, I saw something in his eyes. A mixture of recognition and perhaps envy, because she had had the courage to seek a connection that he had destroyed. "Why are you doing this?" Robert asked me when we were alone. "Why give me this opportunity?" "Because I believe people can change," I answered honestly. "Not completely, perhaps. Not to the point of erasing the past, but enough to create a different future." He nodded, visibly fighting back tears. "I don't deserve your generosity." "It's not about deserving," I said. "It's about choice. My choice. And yours too, if you choose to accept." Robert accepted, and his work in the Recommencement Initiative proved surprisingly valuable. His ability to speak with families in crisis, especially with adult children overwhelmed by the care of elderly parents, came from a place of genuine understanding. He knew the desperation, the frustration, the dark thoughts that could lead someone to consider abandonment as a solution. "I am not here to judge you," he would tell the support groups. "I am here because I have been in the darkest place possible, and I can say with certainty, there is a way back." As the program grew, I began to notice something fascinating. The presence of Diane and Robert in the same organization created a strange parallel with the original story of Eleanor and Ethan. It was as if the universe were giving us a second chance, not to erase the past, but to rewrite it with a different ending. One evening, after a particularly intense day at the foundation, I found myself alone in the garden, sitting in the same gazebo where Eleanor had shown me the images of Robert and Christine so many years ago. The moonlight illuminated the rose bushes, and the scent of the flowers filled the air. "I hope you are proud," I murmured to the starry sky, imagining that perhaps, in some way, Eleanor could hear. "We transformed your legacy into something even greater than you imagined." A gentle breeze caressed my face, gently swaying the roses. For a moment, I had the distinct sensation of not being alone, as if a familiar and affectionate presence was by my side, nodding in silent approval. I remembered the night it all began, the relentless rain, the cruel abandonment, the mysterious figure emerging from the darkness in her wheelchair. "Pretend to be my daughter. Your son and daughter-in-law are going to regret this bitterly." Eleanor was right, but not in the way she had initially imagined. The regret came, but also the possibility of redemption, for Robert, for Diane, for myself, and perhaps, in some way, even for Eleanor, through the work we continued. At 67 years old, I was no longer the fragile, frightened woman who had been left on that highway. I found an inner strength I didn't even know I possessed, an ability to transform pain into purpose, abandonment into connection. And most importantly, I discovered that it is never too late to start over, even after the worst betrayal, even on the darkest nights. When I went back inside the mansion, the lights of the main foyer illuminated the portraits on the wall, no longer just the women Eleanor had helped, but also those we had taken in since then. Dozens of faces, dozens of stories, dozens of rebirths. Among them was a special portrait, Eleanor in her wheelchair, with her determined and slightly austere gaze. Beneath it was a new portrait, recently added, myself, sitting in a chair similar to hers, but with a softer smile. Diane had insisted on adding my photo to the gallery. "You are part of this story too," she argued. "Perhaps the most important part." I touched the Aurora-shaped brooch I always wore, the same one I found in Eleanor's box. It symbolized everything we had built together, the promise of a new dawn after the darkest of nights. The front doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was late for visitors, but at the Aurora Foundation, emergencies had no schedule. Carla came to meet me in the foyer, looking slightly disturbed. "Mrs. Mary, forgive me for bothering you at this hour, but there's someone—" Before she could finish, a young woman entered, supporting an elderly lady who could barely stand. The young woman's face was marked by tears and exhaustion, The older woman seemed disoriented and scared. "Please," the young woman said, her voice trembling. "We found you through the Foundation's website. My grandmother. My parents left her at a rest stop. They said they were going to the restroom and never came back. This was 3 days ago." I approached the older woman, taking her trembling hands in mine. Her eyes, clouded by cataracts and confusion, met mine. "It's all right now," I said softly, feeling the echo of Eleanor's words that rainy night. "You are safe here." The lady squeezed my hands with surprising strength, as if I were her last hope in the world. And in that moment, I understood with crystal clarity the true purpose of everything we had built. It wasn't just about justice or revenge or even redemption. It was about creating a place where the cycle of abandonment could finally be broken. "Carla, prepare the blue room," I instructed, still holding the lady's hands. "George, call Dr. Jessica for a complete examination. Diane should be notified in the morning." As the team mobilized with the efficiency that had become our trademark, I guided the elderly lady to the living room, where the fireplace always remained lit on cold nights. "What is your name?" I asked gently. "Louisa," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Louisa Walters." "Welcome to Aurora House, Mrs. Louisa," I said, helping her settle into a comfortable armchair near the fire. "Your story ends here, and a new one begins." As I watched her accept a cup of hot tea from Carla's hands, I thought about how life moves in circles. Eleanor had found me when I was at my most vulnerable, just as I was now finding Louisa. Robert had abandoned me, just as Louisa's children had abandoned her. But the crucial difference was that now a place existed to interrupt that cycle, to transform abandonment into a new beginning. Aurora House would continue long after I was gone, just as it had continued after Eleanor. Diane would take my place someday, perhaps with Robert's help, finally tying up the loose ends of a story that began with pain, but did not need to end that way. I looked out the window at the starry night and silently thanked that mysterious woman in her wheelchair, who had appeared out of nowhere on a desolate highway and changed the course of so many lives, starting with mine. "You were right, Eleanor," I murmured. "They regretted it bitterly, but what you didn't foresee is that regret can be the beginning of the cure. Time, as I learned, is a patient teacher. 10 years have passed since Eleanor found me on that dark highway, and 8 since she passed away. At 72 years old, I see the world with a clarity that only age and experience can bring. My body may be more fragile, but my mind and spirit are stronger than ever." The Aurora Foundation flourished beyond the most optimistic expectations. We now have 12 shelter homes across the country, each following the model that started in this mansion. Diane took over as executive director 3 years ago, allowing me to gradually step away from daily operations. Her marriage to a dedicated doctor brought the first child to the mansion in decades, little Eleanor, a girl with bright eyes and an indomitable spirit, just like her great-grandmother. Robert, at 60 years old, became a pillar of the Recommencement Initiative. His transformation was complete, from an ungrateful son to a tireless advocate for the rights of the elderly. We never returned to the close relationship we had before, but we found a new way to connect through shared work. On an autumn afternoon, while watching the golden leaves fall in the garden, Sophia came to meet me with a grave expression. "Mary," she began, "I have news about Christine." The name still evoked a pang of discomfort, even after so many years. After her divorce from Robert, Christine had disappeared from our lives. As far as we knew, she had moved to another state and completely started over. "What happened?" I asked, noticing the seriousness on Sophia's face. "She is in the municipal hospital, terminal stage cancer, without family, without friends, without resources." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. How much time does she have left? Weeks, perhaps less, Sophia replied. She specifically asked to speak with you. It was a surprise to the hospital's social worker, who contacted us when Christine mentioned your name. I remained silent for a long moment, contemplating the strange twist of fate. The woman who had conspired to abandon me was now, herself, abandoned in her final moments. "Are you going to see her?" Sophia asked. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Schedule it for tomorrow, please." When I told Diane about the planned visit, she was visibly disturbed. After everything she did, why go to the trouble? "Because some lessons can only be learned when we look into the eyes of our past," I replied. "And because no one deserves to die alone, not even Christine." The next day, George drove me to the hospital. Christine's room was small and impersonal, with only the basic medical equipment and a window overlooking a brick wall. When I entered, I barely recognized her. The beautiful and arrogant woman I knew had been reduced to a fragile, yellowish figure in the bed. Her eyes, however, still held a spark of recognition when she saw me. She tried to sit up, but weakness prevented her. "Mary," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You came." "I came," I replied, sitting in the only chair beside the bed. "Sophia told me you wanted to talk to me." Christine nodded, closing her eyes briefly as if gathering strength. "I need to tell you something before I go." I waited as she coughed, her thin body trembling with the effort. Finally, she continued. "It was my idea," she confessed, looking directly at me for the first time, "to abandon you on that highway." Robert hesitated, but I insisted. I said it was the only way to ensure we would have everything. The confession didn't surprise me, but I still felt a pang of pain hearing the confirmation. "Why?" I asked, not with anger, but with genuine curiosity. "Greed," she replied simply, "and fear. Fear of ending up like my own mother, who died in poverty, depending on strangers. I thought if we had your house, your money, we would be safe." She let out a bitter laugh that turned into another coughing fit. What irony, right? I ended up exactly as I feared, alone, with nothing, depending on the charity of others. I looked around the sterile room and felt a mixture of emotions. Pity, but also a strange sense of closure. "I didn't come here to judge you, Christine," I finally said. "I came because you asked." She extended a trembling hand in my direction. I hesitated for a moment before taking it in mine. Her skin was cold and dry as paper. "I wanted to ask for forgiveness," she said, tears running down her sunken cheeks. "Not because I deserve it, but because I need to say it before I leave. What we did, what I did, was unforgivable." Silence filled the room as I considered her words. Years ago, it would have been impossible for me to offer forgiveness to this woman. But time and experience had taught me lessons that the younger Mary could never understand. "I forgive you, Christine," I finally said, surprising us both with the sincerity in my voice. "Not because what you did was acceptable, but because forgiveness shall freeze me as much as it frees you." Tears of relief ran down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "There is one thing more I need to ask." "What?" "I don't want to die here," she said, looking at the impersonal walls. "Alone, in a cold place like this." I immediately understood what she was asking. It was a bold request, considering our past, but also deeply human. "I'm going to talk to the doctors," I said, getting up. "If your condition allows the transfer, you can spend your last days at Aurora House." The surprise and relief on her face were palpable. "Why?" she asked, echoing my own question from moments before. "Why would you do this for me?" Because Aurora House exists precisely for people who have been abandoned, I replied. And regardless of what you did in the past, I believe everyone deserves dignity at the end. 3 days later, Christine was transferred to Aurora House. Diane initially protested, but ended up accepting my decision. Robert, surprisingly, supported me from the beginning. "She's dying, Mum," he simply said. "Revenge no longer makes sense at this point." We installed Christine in an airy room with a view of the garden. In the days that followed, I saw the surprise in her eyes every time she received gentle care, a kind word. It was as if she were experiencing unconditional generosity for the first time, precisely from the people who had the most reason to hate her. A week after her arrival, she called me to her room. She was visibly weaker, her breathing laborious, her eyes sunken in dark sockets. "I need to ask," she said with difficulty. "That woman in a wheelchair, the one who found you that night, who was she?" The question took me by surprise. "Why do you want to know?" "Because in the last few days, I've been dreaming of her," Christine replied. "In my dreams, she watches me, not with anger, but with understanding, as if she knows something I still don't understand." I sat by her bed, adjusting the pillow so she could breathe better. Her name was Eleanor Riley. She was a former judge who dedicated her life to helping women who had been abandoned like me, like she herself was once. Christine's eyes opened slightly. "She was too?" "Yes," I confirmed. "By her own son, in circumstances similar to mine." "And what happened to her son?" I hesitated, considering whether I should tell the whole story. "He suffered the consequences of his actions. He lost everything, and eventually died alone, never having reconciled with his mother." Christine closed her eyes, absorbing the information. "But with Robert and me it was different," she murmured. "You gave us a chance at redemption." "Yes," I agreed. "That was my choice. And Robert's." A faint smile touched her pale lips. "Thank you for that last lesson, Mary, for showing me there is another path besides retribution." 2 days later, Christine passed away peacefully in her sleep. Robert was by her side, not as an ex-husband, but as a fellow human being on her final journey. We arranged a simple but dignified funeral. To my surprise, several residents of Aurora House attended, women who had only known Christine in her last days, but who understood, perhaps better than anyone, the value of a compassionate ending. After the funeral, Diane found me in the garden, sitting in my favorite spot near the rose bushes. She sat beside me in silence for a while before speaking. "I never fully understood why Grandmother chose the name Aurora for all this," she finally said. "But I think I understand now." "Oh, really? What?" I asked, curious. "The aurora comes after the darkest night," she explained. "It's not just the end of the darkness, but the announcement of a new beginning. What you did for Christine showed me that that new beginning is possible even in the final moments of a life." I smiled, touched by her understanding. "Eleanor would have been proud of you." "Of both of you," Diane corrected. "You completed what she started, Mary. You transformed a project of justice into a mission of healing." That night, alone in my room, I reflected on the strange path life had traced for me. 10 years earlier, I was a broken woman, abandoned on the side of a dark highway, without hope or future. Now, I was the matriarch of a true family, not of blood, but of shared purpose. I picked up the aurora-shaped brooch, which I never left without, and held it up to the light. The golden rays seemed to pulse with life of their own, as if containing the essence of all the stories that intertwined in this mansion over the years. Eleanor, Ethan, Robert, Christine, Diane, myself, and so many other women who had found their way to us. Abandonment, I realized, didn't have to be the end of the story. It could be, paradoxically, the beginning of something new, an opportunity to discover an inner strength we perhaps never knew we possessed. For Eleanor, that discovery led her to create an empire of justice. For me, it led to a mission of compassion and healing, and for future generations, for Diane, for little Eleanor, for all the women who would still cross the gates of Aurora House. Perhaps it meant the chance to break the cycle completely, to create a world where no woman needed to fear being discarded when she was no longer considered useful or convenient. As sleep enveloped me, I had a clear vision of Eleanor, not in her wheelchair, but standing, strong and proud as she must have been before the accident. Beside her was my mother, Elizabeth, both smiling with approval, and between them a figure I recognized as Ethan, Eleanor's lost son, finally reconciled with his mother in the peace that transcends this life. "You did well," they seemed to say. "You completed the circle." I woke up with the first ray of sun coming through the window. A new day, a new beginning. The aurora had arrived again, as it always did, dissipating the shadows of the night, and I was ready to receive it, grateful for the winding road that brought me here, even with all its pains and challenges. Because in the end, I understood the deepest lesson Eleanor had taught me that rainy night. Sometimes, it is precisely in the moment we are abandoned that we discover who we really are and what we are capable of. And that discovery can change not only our own life, but the lives of entire generations. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw dropping. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll wait for you there.